Hi, I'm Laura,
Hi, I'm Deanne.
I'm Philippe.
and welcome to our Lymond Book Club. We are kicking off Pawn and Frankincense today.
New book.
Yay!
So we're gonna dive into the first three chapters, but before we do that, any initial reactions you guys want to share?
I will tell you, it took me a little bit to start the book because, so for those of you who don't know, we've got these on delay. So you'll see this in like, I don't know, a week or two or something, but life has been a little stressful in the United States these past couple of days. And so after the end of Disorderly Nights, I was just like, oh man, I don't know if I can start an intensely stressful book. So I was kind of staring at it going, okay, you can do it. You can do it. You can start. But it was a really good start. So I really enjoyed these chapters a lot.
At least it starts with some comedy.
Yeah, it starts with, I was like, what the hell is happening? And then the end of the portion that we read was also really good. So it was nice.
How about you, Philippe?
I agree. It's a great start to this book. I, in my personal life, read a lot of fantasy, high fantasy, and this out of the series feels the most like a fantasy novel so far, because you've got this like sort of small cast of characters that's traveling together. They're going on a journey. There's intrigue, there's prophecy, there's high sea adventure. So I kind of really appreciate that. Yeah, there's the epic quest. Yeah.
True.
So I like how this one began. And it's easy to read. Like the further and further I go with Dunnett, the easier it is for me to read it. Like I had real problems accessing her language and just figuring out what the heck was going on in Game of Kings and even in Queen's Play a little bit as well. But like these last two have been no problem.
Yeah. And I love Philippa. And she was really fun in these chapters. So
yeah, I like that we're getting a lot of her point of view. And I have a feeling that's definitely going to continue in this book. So
yeah.
And never get
older.
She's getting older. Oh, she's
I'm just saying.
Oh boy. All right.
Thank you, Laura.
Well, I feel like a lot of what I'll say is spoilers. I have to edit myself. I'll say I love the scene with the prophecies because it sets up so much, at least to me when I read it the first time, it set up so much curiosity. Like, what do these prophecies mean? How are they going to play out? I have no idea, but I'm really curious and have all these guesses. So even though I'm sort of like, a lot of times I don't like prophecy in literature, I feel like Dunnett uses it really well and makes it part of the mystery, which makes it fun. And definitely I agree, this feels like a fantasy novel. Like the Dame de Dutance reads Jarrett's mind. There's no other explanation. So I think it kind of is a fantasy novel, just a little tiny bit.
Mm-hmm. She's magic. Like there's magic there. Like I don't see how you can. She literally reads his mind. Like, and it's not like savvy fortune teller just figuring out what someone wants to hear thing. Like she's way more specific than that.
Yeah, like okay, she reads his skepticism, sure, but like she uses the exact words he was thinking.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this woman belongs in a carnival stall. And then like 5 seconds later, she's like, let me get out of my stall so I can help you. Yeah, we'll talk about that when we get to that chapter, but I really want to discuss, I don't know if I like the fact that there's prophecy in this book because it's not my experience with these books so far. So I that may not make sense, but when we get to that chapter, we'll get into it. So
yeah, it makes total sense. It feels a little bit like, because like almost all of the action and decisions and everything in this book seem to be grounded in some sort of reality, like our reality, even though it's sort of heightened and very dramatic and over the top, and we've talked about that before, but it does seem like things are somewhat plausible in our reality. And this woman does not seem plausible. And so it's interesting. It pulls me out a little bit of the story. that doesn't mean I don't like it. I like it.
I wouldn't like it if we had it if she was like a dominating character who showed up a lot, but we get her in very small doses, so I just find it like a interesting flavoring.
Yeah, it feels a little bit maybe like it's kind of, there are more things on heaven and earth, you know, that are like that sort of flavor, you know, just not necessarily like, hey, we're living in a magic realm or anything, but.
And I mean, a lot of what's happened in these books isn't necessarily grounded in reality because it's very overblown. Yeah. But like, so far we haven't had any sort of magical realism. So I don't know. Yeah. But I, unlike Laura, really like prophecy in book and love trying to pick it apart and trying to figure out what it is. There's a really long series of books that Dee and I have both read called The Wheel of Time, where prophecy is everywhere. And every time one of those chapters comes up where a fortune is told or something happens, I'm like, ooh, what's this going to lead to? So I tried to pick apart some of the prophecy in this book, which will be interesting for that chapter's discussion. So
yeah, I look forward to seeing what you say about the prophecy in this book, because I think that's an interesting comparison with Wheel of Time, because in Wheel of Time, often the prophecy that you think what it means at the beginning is not what it ends up meaning at the end. And so I'm curious to see if this is similar. Like if we have ideas now in this discussion today that when we later find out what it actually means, we're like, not even close.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, Philippe, let's dive in.
All right, so chapter 1, Baden. So we go to Switzerland, where it's been, maybe 3 months since the action that happened at the end of Disorderly Nights. Jarrett and Philippa are traveling together, which is a terribly interesting way to start this chapter. And they have tracked Lymond down to Baden, Switzerland, which is a town that is very well known for its healing medicinal baths, which are apparently quite smelly. So Jarrett and Philippa go into this one bath where they find Lymond, and they spy on him, and they talk to a man wearing shell pink, who pretends to not know who Lymond is. Lymond is playing a card game in the baths with Onofrion Ziswitz, who is sort of a servant of some kind. I'm not quite sure.
He's like a very senior servant.
Yeah, like a butler / major domo /
like the head of the household of one of the top guys in the town.
Yeah.
Also a massive foodie, which I sort of love.
Yeah. So he's playing a card game with him. A soap merchant and his wife and 2 nuns join the game. Turns out the nuns are actually not nuns. They try and steal some of the coins, and they try and convince Lymond to go to Algiers because they saw Una and her child there, which is just really heavy-handed. Like, oh, guess where we were? Yeah. They escape into the dressing room, but they are murdered by the man in shell pink, which I had figured out was him before they actually revealed it. And I was a little sad that they revealed that so soon, because I was like, I figured out one thing that happened already so soon. Yeah, and that's the first part of this.
How'd you figure it out?
It just, like, the way he was standing at the balcony, he's like, oh, do you know him?
He's super fishy.
Yeah, he was super fishy. I was like, and who else could it have been? I knew it wasn't Gabriel. Gabriel's not going to be in Switzerland. We're not going to get our confrontation with Gabriel so soon in the book. So, okay. But it is a scheme of Gabriel's in order to lure Lymond to Algiers and spring a trap on him. And of course, he ends up going there anyway. So,
yeah. I did not figure out the shell pink guy thing, but it was because I wasn't really like, this scene was so bonkers that I was just like, I'm just reading through to see what happens. Like, I was just trying to get to the end to be like, okay, what's the end result of this bizarre scene? I loved all the little images of what was happening, like the trays floating on the water with things, and the nuns having what I'm guessing must have been henna. I think their feet must have been hennaed, because it talks about their toenails being orange, which is what henna does to your hands and feet when you do it. So, because it says they were painted, and I was like, well, they could either have makeup, tattoos, or henna, and it seemed like maybe they have henna, which would be specifically Middle Eastern. So I don't know. I was intrigued by that. Yeah, definitely clued into the nuns were not nuns though. Like, that was pretty obvious.
Pretty quickly.
So
I think this is another prime example of Dunnett thinking in her head, what's the worst thing I can have Lymond do? But like actually there's a good reason. So he's like ripping the clothes off of a nun and barging into the women's changing room. And of course he's got really good reasons.
And like tossing them, somersaulting them in the waters and like dunking them under the water. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I'm super intrigued by this place that I am definitely assuming is a historical place because she's so good about that. So there's like mixed gender bathing in Switzerland in the 1500s.
I think there still is. I think you can still go there. And
well, yeah, but I'm not shocked today.
Well, I mean, they had this kind of stuff during the Roman Empire. Of course they had it in the 1500s.
Yeah, that's true. It's just funny. So, yeah.
I enjoyed the introductory description of Jarrett. He was black-haired and prepossessing and rude, a masterful combination.
Mm-hmm.
He just cracks me up.
Oh, Jarrett.
And I'm skipping ahead, but I love how the Dame de Dutance talks to him as well.
Mm-hmm.
I love that Jarrett is sort of like this very handsome bull in a china shop. Like he just kind of stumbles around and makes decisions based on his emotions and then like charges off in the wrong direction. And I don't know.
But he's got a good heart. Now he's going to charge off to Algiers to help Lymond.
Yeah. So we'll see. He feels like he's starting off on a better note in this book. So
he's no longer under Gabriel's spell, which helps.
Yeah. Although, what the hell is he doing with Philippa? And how is like?
I think
you try telling Philippa.
Yeah, you try stopping Philippa from doing something she wants. She's gonna go anyway. She can go with or without an escort, so he goes with her.
It's true. It's just, I mean, I feel like there have been some examples of getting her to do things she doesn't want to do, mainly knocking her out and sending her anyway. And so it's kind of like, really? You couldn't just send her home? Like, it's
kind of hard to like knock someone out and put them on a boat and like they, with enough time that they're not gonna wake up.
Yeah. I mean, I love that she's there. Totally. I think it's awesome. I think it's also super unrealistic. Like, it doesn't matter how determined you are as a 15-year-old girl. Like, there's no way. But I do love it.
And also, that's kind of something Lymond would do, but I don't think Jarrett would have the wherewithal to.
Yeah. But he would, I mean, they would just bundle her off physically back to her mother. Like, there's ways to do it. It's not gonna.
I think it surprised me that Lymond doesn't manage to get rid of her. It doesn't surprise me that Jarrett can't get rid of her.
Yeah, I was super surprised. There's that point where he kind of agrees to let her go. And I just wrote off to the side. I was like, what? That was not convincing. Like, why is that what convinced you to let her go? It's like it's like Lymond just kind of said like, oh, whatever, come.
I give up.
He just kind of Lymond is too disturbed that she's coming along for this. He may protest and say that he is, but I think that might just be a cover. Like, I think
Lymond
out of her being there.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
I mean, he certainly doesn't want her to get hurt because a lot of people in his life do end up getting hurt because of his actions. But
yeah,
I don't know.
Why would he want her there though? Because he definitely still seems to think of her as a child.
Yeah. And he doesn't, I don't think he buys this, like, I'm going to take care of the baby business. Like, I love that that's her motivation, but I think Lymond thinks that's ridiculous.
Oh, yeah. Well, of course he does. He laughs his ass off about it.
So, but anyway.
What do you think it tells us that our introductory image of Lymond is of him playing this game of bouillot, which is like a precursor to poker played on a board?
It's interesting that we've had so many chess metaphors and now we're sort of having like poker-esque metaphors. Like, although Philippe does say later, she talks about Lymond playing chess, but I wonder if it's a precursor to this book being like, I don't know. Poker has a lot of strategy too. I was about to say like less strategic and more, gambling and taking risks and but poker's really strategic too. I don't know. There's a lot of bluffing, so maybe
There's a lot of bluffing. Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think it's definitely, and it's also just like the fact that we meet him playing a game, knowing that, like, I think it sets up the idea of him and Gabriel with like this road trip chess game between the two of them.
It's like, you know, he starts out playing hard and fast, and like he's in it to win. And as much as he protests that he doesn't really care to find the child, like we know definitely that that's his ultimate goal. Like you can fight through that. So
it doesn't matter what amount of indifferent facade he has about this baby. He is absolutely not indifferent about the baby. Like, no way. So
why do you think that's in here? Why does he pretend to be indifferent?
I think just for practical purposes alone, not going into his, you know, subconscious at all, but for practical purposes alone, he already knows that Gabriel is following his steps. So if he just plays it off cool that he's not really interested, then, you know, perhaps anybody that's spying on him will report that back.
Yeah, there's definitely a sense where the more indifferent he is to the baby, the safer the baby is. Although there's a slight chance if he plays it too indifferent, then it's sort of like, well, he doesn't care, let's kill the baby. So you can't go too far that direction, but yet the more invested he is in the health and welfare of this child, the more the child can be used as a piece of leverage. So
I think it's also, I agree that those are the reasons that are in character. And I think part of it's also to try to get Philippa and Jarrett to go away by pretending he doesn't care.
Yeah.
But I also think there's a like extra textual reason, which is like there's two ways to read this book. One is obviously having read the rest of the books, and the other is picking it up fresh for the first time. And I think for a new reader who's starting with this one, she's playing a lot of games of like the same game she played in Game of Kings. Is Lymond a good guy or a bad guy? Which of course, if you read the other books, you're not going to fall for these games. But she likes to like play the game with the new reader anyway. And I think it's like having her cake and eating it too, with like, he's so dark and anti-hero-ish, but like, no, he's not.
I wonder also if there's an element of him trying to contain his own emotion. Like, he has to be thoughtful and meticulous and smart about how he goes about finding his son and beating Gabriel. And I would imagine, because he's human and feels things deeply, that if he stopped and let himself actually feel the emotions of terror that he probably has for his son, he would be incapacitated. Like, it's, you know, like those emotions could be overwhelming if you dwell on them. So perhaps there's an element of just trying to stuff everything down and be like, I don't care, we'll deal with it when we deal with it, you know, that kind of stuff.
Definitely. Speaking of things that are awful to think about, these nuns, when they're kind of dropping all these clues about Una being in Algiers, spend a long time talking about these like horrible methods of torture. Flayed alive, stuffed with straw, cauterized. Ugh, yeah, gross. Why do you think that's in here?
Because they're trying to illustrate how horrible it is there, and this is where Una and Carradine are. So it's going to make Lymond even more likely to go and try and rescue them there.
Yeah, I mean, the more upset he is, the more likely he is to make a mistake. So, yeah.
Although Onofrian says, but women and children surely are not subject to these. And then they're like, oh no, they have horrible things happen to them too. Rape. Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, these nuns did not do a very good job.
No, they're very obvious.
Very obvious and very heavy-handed. Like, oh, we were here and we saw this woman who was Irish and she had a golden-haired child on her lap.
Yeah. And as soon as I read that, I was like, I mean, obviously I was already suspicious of the nuns, but also I was like, why is she holding this baby that she's completely rejected? Like, we already know that she's not going to be sitting around holding her baby from the previous story. So
Well, and the way they just keep going on and no one's asking. No one's like, wow, really? Tell us more. They just like, no one engages with them and they're just like, oh, and this too.
Yeah. Let us give you all these details about this thing you apparently have no interest in. Yeah. Yeah, that was a fun.
So also during this whole scene, Lymond manages to make a romantic connection with the soap merchant's wife, and later she sneaks into his hotel room and they have sex.
Yeah.
What did you take from that?
Classic Lymond.
I mean, sure, why not?
I think that's interesting because we have like they have sex, and also I guess I'm jumping ahead, but Salamanca checks on him and sees that he's sleeping well, which is like how do I say, Lymond doing well emotionally and physically in terms of like having sex and sleeping well. We get that here. Yeah.
I do love I love Philippa's like when she and Lymond first interact in this chapter, when she wait, no. She says, who is she talking to? No, she's talking to Jarrett when she says, because you need a woman and I'm the nearest thing to it you're likely to get.
It's so funny.
It's both self-deprecating and super insulting to Jarrett. I love it. He's like, why the hell did you come? Because you need a woman and I'm the nearest thing to it you're likely to get. So I love it.
Yeah, and this bit ends again with the Lymond ripping the clothes off the nuns, and he says to Jarrett, "Did you see that? Good, come and see more." And goes off to the women's changing room. And then Philippa's watching all this, and she's quite upset. And then Onofrian comes out and explains it, and she goes, "So that's why." But at least now she's like able to not just assume the worst of Lymond, but kind of realize he's got other motivations.
Yeah, and just that she's like, she's willing to stop and say, okay, wait, maybe there's some, this is what I see, but maybe there's some motivation. And then she's also like, but how did Mr. Crawford suspect? So she's trying to figure out, like, the thing I like about Philippa is that she's trying to figure out the details, you know? So it's not just that these were bad guys and, you know, her assumptions are wrong. She's also like, okay, how did he know? Like, what gave it away? And I like that about her.
She's trying to figure out how he works.
Yeah.
She's learning from a very capable, smart person.
Yeah.
Should we jump to the next section?
Yeah. So after the interesting encounter in the bathhouse, Lymond, Jarrett, and Philippa dine at the Engel. We learn that Jarrett is supposed to be in France with St. Mary's, and that St. Mary's was hired out by the King of France. So that is an answer to what's going on with St. Mary's right now. Jarrett is very adamant that he wants to be a part of whatever happens when Lymond catches up with Gabriel. Specifically, he wants to execute him. He wants to kill him. And Philippa gives her reason, as she's there to look after the baby, which met by humorous laughter from all, because that's just such a silly reason.
I mean, it's not her. Like, I love that her, this is her focus, you know, her focus. As soon as she heard about this baby alone in this foreign country, separated from his family, like, her focus was, okay, we got to go save the baby. and I love that. It's not very practical, but
she must have been 14 at the end of the last book. She must have turned 14 at some point when we weren't told, and now she's had another birthday, so she's 15. But it's still like, she's definitely like a teenager. Like, everything is very black and white. Like, there's baby, someone needs to take care of the baby, there's no women to take care of this baby, these men are incompetent, I guess it has to be me.
I better go and do it, you know. And
she, by the way, has no idea how to take care of a baby either.
No. But I think the thing about this whole motivation of hers that I absolutely adore is the part where it's later on in the chapter, but it relates to the same thing, where she says that her hope is that if they can find the baby fast enough, that he'll never know he wasn't wanted, which is a little bit telling on a couple of ways. One, it reveals her heart, and just her heart for like that someone feels cared for and valued in life, but also reveals what she thinks about Lymond's opinion about his son, that she does think that he doesn't want this kid. Or at least at this point, she's thinking, at that point in the conversation where she said that, she was thinking it. And I think it was a flashback. So, but she said, if you know, that she's thinking she's the one who's going to show this kid that he's wanted. Even though we know that Lymond really wants him. So.
Which makes sense in terms of why she's so relentless.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. She just can't leave it to the men. They won't do it right.
So we also get some descriptions of her that are interesting, kind of similar to what we got last time. She's her clothes are creased, her hemline is showing, her hair is unwashed brown rat's tails.
Yeah.
So she's definitely like this kind of like scraggly kid following along with these adult men.
Yeah, and there's several mentions to her like being plain or, you know, unassuming or having like dirty skirts or, you know, all of this. And it's just like, wow, this is a lot of emphasis on the fact that this person is not attractive. Mm. And I'm kind of like, really? Is she like, is she that unattractive? Like,
she's just a kid who doesn't know how to like dress well yet.
Yeah. She'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So also notable here is Philippe's assessment of Gabriel's motivations, which is, if I were Gabriel, I'd want to humiliate Lymond first. I'd taunt him, I'd shame him, and then I'd kill him.
Yep. And I think Lymond goes, I think that makes him go, oh, she does have some insight. Like, yeah.
Well, she's at least more perceptive than Jarrett, which isn't saying much.
Isn't saying a lot. But he's an adult and she's a kid and she's picked up on this stuff.
Yeah, Jarrett and insightful are not words that I would put in the same sentence.
I love when he says like pigged I see with a full set of teeth, which I wonder if he's like, oh, you've grown up, if that's what that statement is, because a full set of teeth is like adult teeth. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if he's kind of saying, whoa, she grew up a little in that. I don't know if that's what that means, but that's what I thought when I read it.
I interpreted it as a comment about her like perceptiveness, but yeah, I don't know. It must be an expression that means something. It's probably some Scottish expression that all the Scottish viewers are like, oh, that means this.
I mean, the only expression I know about teeth also has to do with age, but it's about horses. So it's like, that's how you tell the age of a horse, is look at their teeth. So,
well, look at the in the mouth.
Right. But yeah, so who knows?
Should we go to the next section?
Yeah, so Zitzwitz enters and he is prepared a sumptuous, gorgeous meal for them with venison and cherry sauce and all sorts of other things that sound delicious, but they end up throwing out anyway, because I think it's just a little too much.
Are we suspicious of this guy?
I don't get that feeling at all.
I'm a little suspicious of him. Like, he seems super convenient and like, I don't know. Maybe it's just me being like super suspicious of everyone because I'm reading a Dunnett book. But
you're asking if we're suspicious. I thought you were asking if they were suspicious of him.
No, as the readers, like, are we suspicious of him? I am a little suspicious of him.
I don't know enough about him yet, I guess.
And I'm kind of wondering if Lymond's a little suspicious of him. I don't know. I can't tell. But
what made you suspicious?
He just seems super convenient, and he's like coming in and like taking over everything, and like, I'm gonna order all the clothes and this, and we're gonna replace that and make all this stuff happen. And I'm like, who is this guy and where did he come from? So,
but that's kind of what it was, though. So, I mean, if Lymond was super suspicious about him, I don't think he would have asked him to come along.
Maybe. Unless he wanted to keep someone close, unless he was suspicious and just wanted to keep him close. Awesome. He also left, he was like the head servant for some government official, which probably was kind of a cushy job, and left it to go traipse across Europe and North Africa with, I don't know.
He explains it as like the Duke is getting old and doesn't appreciate his talents anymore.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to eat any of the food that he makes, and I
Yeah.
don't know.
Maybe he just wants to go on an adventure, and here's the guys with some adventure, and I don't know.
Here's an opportunity to spend a lot of Lyman's money buying beautiful things.
Speaking of which, how rich is Lymond?
Rich.
He seems super rich.
It's also important to note that Zitzwitz is also sort of a handy bodyguard to have around. He was very capable in the tussle in the bathhouse, and you know, a little bit later when we see him on the ship when they get attacked by pirates, he's sort of, you know, holding his sword and ready to go to action as well. So
Yeah, there was a comment about how Lymond let him come not so much because of his food abilities of food, but because of the way he punched somebody in that fight or something. Yeah.
and he's a man of large stature as well. So potential bodyguard material.
All the men in these books are huge.
It's true.
Like,
Except Lyman and Jarrett. Jarrett is short and Lyman is not tall.
that's true. It's like, why is everybody so huge? That's so funny. Okay.
There's also 2 references in this to Philippa having a pain in her middle. What did you take that to mean?
Well, she was definitely upset that Lyman was laughing at her about the baby comment. So I don't know. I think she wants to get over her feelings of enmity for him that she's held for so long, and that there's still a vestigial trace of them. So that might just be like whenever he's mean to her or something, she feels like, wait, I thought we got over this now.
Yeah. I think she's also stressed and trying to hide it, like, because she doesn't want them to think of her as a kid, you know. She knows she's young, she knows she's a teenager, and she wants to be seen as a woman and an adult and capable. And I think that's super stressful. Like it is super stressful. And I love the way that she also, like, even in the midst of that, she's willing to go places that other people aren't conversationally. Like at the top of 16, there's this lovely where she just asks Lyman, she says, why did you laugh when you knew why I meant to come with you, said Philippa. And Jarrett put his hand on her arm. To look after the baby, she had said, a subject none of them mentioned, an affair so private and painful that you pretended it didn't exist, period. Unless you were Philippa Somerville, period. And like, she just is like, nope, we're talking about it. So
Yeah, I think also the pain is like she has such empathy for the baby. She like really feels awful for this baby.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
We do learn in this section sort of the plot of the rest of the book, in that in order to get to Constantinople,
Go into Constantinople.
the King of France has hired him to escort Monsieur Georges Gautier, who we met in book 2. He's the usurer. He made this beautiful clock / spinet, which is a musical instrument.
Mm-hmm. Like a key.
Spinet is a musical instrument, but it's also like a sort of animatronic kind of thing. Like it does all these little automated motions.
Yeah, there were these. There's one kind of similar. It's not a. It is a clock, but it's not a spinet. But it has similar things at the Met. At least there was a couple years ago, and it's got all these like secret compartments. If you pull a lever, things pop out, and one of the kings of France had this one, and it's like huge. It's like 10 feet tall and like 8 feet wide, and it's ridiculously complicated and has all these gears and levers all through it. And
there was actually an exhibition at the Met it was last year. It was called Making Marvels, Science and Splendor at the Courts of Europe. And it was all this like automata like this. It was super interesting.
Yeah.
So the king hired Lymond to escort Georges Gautier to bring this to the Sultan Suleiman. And so his next move is to go to Lyon and pick it up, because that's where Georges Gautier is, and we already know he lives with the Dame de Toutance. So that's how we get there.
Back to the lady.
And also they're just, they talk about St. Mary's again and how they've been hired and how Guthrie is now sort of in charge of the army in France, or not the army, but whatever St. Mary's has become. Yeah, a lot of this chapter is sort of rehashing the events of the last book and just telling you what's happened in the 3 months since.
You guys asked last time at the end of Disorderly Nights, hey, whatever happened to like de Villiganyan? And we find out here that he's going to Brazil, which he actually did do. And there's an island off of Rio now named after him. If you Google him, that's what you'll learn.
Okay.
Also super interesting is that Graham Reed Mallet has gone back to Malta and is resuming his sort of quest to take over the Knights Hospitaller from Juan de Jomedes.
Yeah, I was kind of curious about this because, I mean, obviously, with communication the way it is, like he can clearly beat news of what he's done in Scotland to Malta and could, do some sort of coup / whatever to take over the Knights in Malta. But it's not like the King of France isn't going to know immediately. The Dowager Queen of Scotland knows what's going on. Like the royalty of Europe is going to figure this out. The King of Spain is going to figure it out. Like it's not, even if they're enemies, they're still going to, this news is going to filter through everyone. So I'm so curious about like, what does Graham think he's going to do? Like, I mean, be the Grand Knight of the husband, be the Grand Master for like 6 months until...
But I don't think it's that unreasonable because once he becomes Grandmaster, if he manages it, it's not like they can just depose him because of some rumors. Even if there's like stuff backing up the rumors, like why, like they don't, like the King of France doesn't have the power to depose the head of the Knights of Malta.
Yeah, but if the Spanish and the Pope find out, they absolutely can. Like it's not.
Maybe the Pope could, but I don't think the Spanish can. I think that the head of the Knights of Malta is like the equivalent of a monarch, so they're not. He doesn't report to them; they're equals. And he can totally just bullshit away and be like, it's all lies made up by my enemies. Like the further it gets from the source, the less likely anybody's going to believe it.
Yeah.
Plus, isn't the Pope and France sort of at odds? Aren't they sort of two of like the 4 or 5 major factions in the world right now?
Yeah, I mean,
he's under no obligation to believe anything that the royal powers of France and Scotland say to him. So,
isn't the King of Spain sort of on the same side with the Pope right now? Charles?
Yes.
One of the Charleses, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's highly possible that Graham Reed Mallet could sort of resume his coup and win. Although I hope it doesn't happen. So.
Or people of Malta.
We do get Lymond's reasoning why he doesn't want to kill Gabriel yet, because that would put his son in danger, which is perfectly acceptable and understandable. Although Jarrett doesn't seem to understand that right away, but we talk about him in perception a lot. So
yeah, it's very telling about the difference between him and Philippa, because Jarrett's like, why won't you kill him? Let's go kill him. And Philippa's like, no, that would get
no, that's dumb.
like she gets it.
Yeah, clearly you can't. I also love that you get little hints, like I'm still riding this train of, I think Philippa and Lymond are going to get together eventually. Not giving up on this train.
I wouldn't give up on it.
Do what?
I said I wouldn't give up on it.
Yeah, I definitely think this is. So on page 19, like halfway through, I thought this was a really interesting little tidbit where it says, it's this description of Lymond rebuilding the fire. It says he stood up slowly, the long oversleeve sliding, the da-da-da-da, moving across, da-da. His hands performing their exact office drew Philippa's aching attention as how often before to their form and strength. No, he said, so you just get this little glimpse of Philippa going,
She's having her sexual awakening and Lymond is there.
Also, she's super practical. Like just dump the dinner out the window,
Like there's a rubbish dump right under the sill there.
Mm-hmm.
Although it's also interesting that when Lymond sleeps with the soap merchant's wife, Jared is the one who is judgmental and seemingly jealous, and Philippa's like, whatever, at least they're clean.
Yeah. she's just so practical. Although there is this moment where it says, like right after she had that moment of noticing him, and then Jarrett is like, "Can you tell us why?" And she's like, "Oh, Jarrett." And then there's this moment where her nose is running because she's crying, like she's crying without letting tears go down her face. And it's just like the plight of this child is so moving to her. And
Oh yeah, that's why we love her. She's got a good heart, even though she's very blunt.
There's a really interesting paragraph on page 20, and this happens after Lymond is insisting that, you know, they go back to England. He's like, leave me be, I've got my own business. But halfway down page 20, a long time afterwards, she was to remember what an excellent chess player Francis Crawford was, and that whether romance existed in him or not, sentimentality had no place at all.
mm-hmm.
So it's sort of telling us of things to come without revealing too much. And I'm super intrigued by this passage.
And we also know that her perception of Lymond was so skewed. Like as a child and as a young teen, like her perception of his motivations was so skewed wrong. And she seems to be moving towards a more accurate view of him. And she is so practical. But yet I sort of wonder if Philippa's perception of Lymond in this book is going to be somewhat the equivalent of like Jarrett's perception of Lymond in the last book, where she is an unreliable narrator if we're looking at her to analyze Lymond for us. You know, like, is she going to see him clearly? Like maybe she will, I don't think she's as unreliable as Jarrett because she sees things much more clearly than he does. But, you know, do we believe her when she's talking to us about Lymond? Like, do we think that her perception is impartial or accurate? I don't know that it is. So
what do you think these two sentences that Philippe read could be hinting at or foreshadowing?
Well, I think it hints that they're going to be involved with each other for a long time because it says a long time afterwards. So like we get this sense of like she's going to be around for a while. But then it's like this excellent chess player that Francis Crawford is. So I get the feeling that she's going to be caught up in whatever plans and deceptions and bluffs and feints that he is planning now. She's going to be caught up in all of that. And then this, whether romance existed in him or not, sentimentality had no place at all, which I don't think is true. Like, I do think he is sentimental in the sense that he feels sentiment, you know, like that he does feel strong emotion. He doesn't let it, well, he does let it color his decisions actually sometimes, and he doesn't always let it show. He's not overtly sentimental, but he cares about his family. He cares about all of that.
Well, I think the word sentimentality is really important though, because I'm looking at the definition right now. The definition is excessive tenderness, sadness, or nostalgia. Similar words include mawkishness, emotionalism. So I think the idea is that the sentimentality has this implication of like mawkishness, right? This like too much. Bucklew is described as sentimental in the previous book.
Jared is sentimental.
Jared is definitely.
Yeah.
I don't think it's saying that he doesn't feel things or that he's not emotional and that he doesn't love. And in this sentence specifically, is it ambiguous about romance? And that could be capital R romance or not. But the idea that sentimentality has no place, like he's not going to make a decision out of this like over emotion. And also like
practical.
Yeah, he's very practical. So even if he does feel something deeply, he's still making practical decisions.
Right. Which from Philippa, I think that whole statement is a compliment. Like she's saying that this is, you're right. I think you're right. If the sentiment here is like an over expression of emotion and he doesn't have that, then from her perspective, that's something that's positive about Francis Lymond, that like whether he's romantic or not, we'll find out later, but that he's not driven by emotion or ruled by emotion in ways that some people are.
Well, because you might also think like if he was ruled by sentimentality, he'd just forget all the planning, forget the King of France and the spinet. He'd just barge off to Algiers without a plan to go save the baby, and probably get himself killed like instantly. So he's even though he obviously, we know he really wants to save this baby because we were there for the vow. He's making all these plans and he's being very deliberate, and he's not just like barging off to save him as fast as possible.
Mm.
Yeah. Yay, Lymond. I am excited to see the plans, by the way. I think it's gonna be fun. I love this. I love at the end she goes, I think I want to go to Brazil.
She's very witty.
She really is.
She has some great one-liners. So there's a one later that I want to point out between her and Marta. So
yeah, and just to also this whole thing about her saying they're both clean, if that's anything, and then she led the way philosophically downstairs, and she's just like, well, it is what it is. Moving on. So
definitely. This just super amuses me how melodramatic Jared is. He is an island with all its bridges wantonly severed. What hostage to evil, said Jared, poetic in his thumping displeasure, will this night's business conceive?
Oh, Jared.
Like, dude.
Jared, who loves melodrama.
Yeah. He spent a lot of time with Gabriel, even though he's against Gabriel now, he's talking like Gabriel. And he's so judgmental, and I'm telling you, he's jealous.
Oh yeah, I think so too.
And not of the girl, or not of Lymond, he's jealous of the girl.
Right. Yeah. But absolutely never gonna admit that to himself or others.
No.
Yeah, I'm super looking forward to reading The Captive Prince and the fanfic of Jarrett and Lymond.
It's pretty much what it is, yeah. But in Captive Prince, I have to say that like the Jarrett character is a lot more competent and functional than our Jarrett. And the Lymond character is a little bit less competent, just so they're more evenly balanced.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. Otherwise, it would just be kind of ridiculous. Yeah.
Shall we move on to chapter 2?
Let's do it.
No.
Right, chapter 2, a Lyon. So it takes them about 3 weeks to travel there, and they get attacked sort of 3 times on the way. The biggest attack that comes across them is they come across what's called the Protestant baiting, which I don't know, is that something like a bear baiting? It's something religious that was happening at the time that I'm not quite sure. I'd have to do more research of that.
I think they're just they just find a prostitute. They find a Protestant and slip of the tongue and like string them up. I mean, it's just like a mob, like, you know. Hey, grab them, and you know.
Yeah, this was like the early days of the Protestant Reformation, and it was all very controversial and stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of like, you know, the equivalent. I don't know what the European equivalent, the American equivalent would be like tar and feather them, and you know, run them out of town on a rail. You know, so whatever that equivalent is.
So something happens to one of Ziswit's servants where he gets sort of separated, and then the whole group gets separated. Then we find out later that the 3 people that end up getting killed are Ziswit's his assistant and the 2 people that Lymond had brought with him from Mid-Culture. So that's a little too sort of coincidental. So this is clearly somebody was attacking them on purpose, where the first 2 times were probably just rogue brigands or something.
Maybe.
Oh, I think they were all set up by Gabriel.
I don't think they were rogue. I'm suspicious of anything being coincidence.
Gabriel really has it out for him, which is not surprising. So they do eventually reach Lyon, and it's raining. They meet Gautier. This is Lymond and Jarrett now. And the Dame de Dutense wants to see Lymond, but only if he brings Jarrett up with him. She will not allow Lymond to come up unless Jarrett comes with. So they go up. There's this dark room. She makes her entrance. It's all very mystic. Jarrett sort of likens her to a witch. And she gives them several prophecies, which we will go into. I think it's very interesting. She reads Jarrett's mind clearly and concisely. So like we get this idea that she's the true deal. She's not just some parlor shop sort of hedge witch, I would like to call her, where she's fooling people into thinking that her prophecies are real. So yeah.
So I will highlight the first paragraph of this chapter has the line that I enjoyed, which was that after 3 weeks in Lymond's company, even Philippa's iron nerves were vibrating.
Yep. I also loved the in the next paragraph it says so she's not disturbed by all these brigands and things because she lives on the border of England and Scotland and she's just used to, you know, raids in the night and all of that. But it says what shook her, and then we get another one of these sentences where you get the beginning of the sentence and then you get a whole bunch of description in the middle and then you get the end of the sentence. So the sentence is actually what shook her was Lymond's articulate and nauseating power to command.
Articulate and nauseating.
Yeah, like that's an interesting way to describe it.
Well, and we get another reference to the scourge of Francis Crawford's disparaging tongue. He's a very capable leader, but he is not a pleasant one.
Mm-hmm. And you also get the feeling that like she's felt the rough side of his tongue several times, you know. Yeah.
And this sort of makes sense because he's this basically like this young, pretty boy still, but he commands all these powerful men just through sheer force of his like intense personality in terms of both like being able to just tell them what to do and being so unpleasant about it.
And competent, like
yeah. Super competent, but a total asshole.
Yeah. Yep.
We also have the line that he balked at publicly beating up Europe in pursuit of a 1-year-old byblow. Maybe he balked publicly, but we know that's what he's really doing.
Yep.
Do you guys want to get into the prophecies?
Sure. Before we do that, though, one thing I forgot to mention was that Gautier shows them the spinet, and it's this majestical, beautiful thing covered with gold and rubies. And Jarrett's like just dumbstruck by it. So, and then they go up to the dome.
Yes. I love her opening line includes, "I rejoice in comely people around me," because they're both hot. And then she accuses Lymond of sulking. And his response is also super funny. "I was projecting, I thought, a strong impression of patience."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we get a little reminder that she has a link to his family. There's we're talking before they meet, he says, she'd once given some help to Lymond on her own severe terms because of a distant link, it was said, with his family. So we're again reminded that there's something going on with her and Sibylla and him, and we don't know what it is, but it's like don't forget. So
his grandfather too. She said something about his
his grandfather. Yeah. Yes.
Sibylla's father.
Love this description that Jarrett gives about she's the older variety of witch who liked a theatrical smack to her necromancy.
She certainly is theatrical.
Oh, that wig. That daffodil wig of hers. Oh.
The way they enter, where like they're in a dark room and then a curtain peeks open and they go into her room and there's like one candle lighting her face, like it reminds me of the entrance into Sleep No More. Like it's so theatrical and it's like you're passing through this like into another world through like a portal kind of experience.
There's a little spotlight right on her face, and then she just steps off on a particular foot. Because Lymond says right after she says like I was projecting this patience, and then melodrama makes Mr. Blythe uncomfortable, which of course he's being sarcastic, and then she says, "Does it? Yet what more melodramatic than to join a militant order of monks because one rather commonplace girl died of the plague? Balance your accounts, Mr. Blythe." And it's just like, whoa, ouch.
Well, and then the next page, she says, "Whatever made you think that melodrama makes Mr. Blythe uncomfortable, he revels in it."
Yeah, which he does.
She knows exactly who these people are and what's going on with them.
He knows a lot.
Yeah, down to the name of his dead fiance, which.
Well, and she makes some implications about Jarrett. First, she says, "What a sorry marriage you would have had of it had he been christened Elizabeth," referring to Gabriel. So she is definitely drawing a connection between his infatuation with Elizabeth and his infatuation with Gabriel.
Oh, yeah.
And then, of course, he's super melodramatic in his responses. And I love the way the narrator describes him. No one had ever been able to call Jarrett Blythe a submissive young man, violent in love, in hatred, and in all his enthusiasms. He heard these words with a rising passion and outraged disbelief.
Also, like, keep going.
Also, what was worse, Lymond had heard them. White-faced, rage in the darkness, Jarrett opened his mouth and suddenly heard in his head the lady's cool words of a moment ago. "I neither like nor dislike, I merely record the truth." He did not speak.
Yeah, I just love the fact that it's like, it's not even that she said these horrible things or what he thinks are horrible things, but that she said them in front of Lymond. Which...
So then I am super entertained by his vow. He says, "Then you must put on record that I once loved a girl and wished to make her my wife, and once I loved a man and wished to make him my leader. I shall never do either again."
And I wrote, really?
Yeah.
True.
I have a sneaking suspicion he's going to do both. Maybe by the end of this book. Like,
Yeah, but I do also think that what love he feels for whoever replaces them is going to be different. It's not going to be as infatuate. At least I hope.
yeah, I hope that this has taught him at least a little bit of a lesson. The thing with Gabriel, like, we'll
Very,
see.
very bold of you to assume that Jarrett would learn anything.
That's true. Maybe. We'll see.
And her response is that she tells him, "You are adequate to your fate, Mr. Blythe." What does that mean?
You need no help from me to find it.
Yeah, like, he's gonna get what he gets. Like, he doesn't need any guidance. He's headed in the direction. Like, he's just going to his fate. And I love that it says, and surprisingly, it was Lymond's voice, but it said sharply, "You cannot debar a human being from love." The old face, undisturbed, turned to look at him. "It is easy. Who should know better than you? But what Mr. Blythe has been engaged in was not love, my dear Francis," which, bold of her to call him Francis. "It was romance, a thing to which Mr. Blythe has been very prone, together with melodrama." And then the whole thing about he revels in it.
But it's actually fascinating that Lymond is the one leaping to defense of love.
Yeah. It's like, wait a second. Yeah.
What did you make of her "who should know better than you"?
That you cannot debar a human from love.
Yeah.
So
Maybe that he's tried to do it to himself and failed miserably in the past.
maybe, or like, he should know that you can't prevent people from loving each other. I wonder if it's a reference. I wonder if it's a reference to his parentage, perhaps, except that he doesn't know about it. So that "who would know better than you" comment wouldn't make sense because he doesn't know. Like, we assume that there's something fishy about his parentage, and at least I assume that. And but he doesn't seem to know it. So
I definitely take it as her calling him out for keeping himself so cut off from the possibility of love. Like, definitely with Christian Stewart, I think the possibility was there, but circumstances also prevented it. But he definitely has like a barrier up.
Yeah. I mean, you get the feeling that even if like the woman who was perfect for him or the man who was perfect for him like stood in front of him, he would not embrace that.
Oh no. Didn't he say at the end of Queen's Play, "I'm never getting married"?
Yeah. He did. I do not believe that will be true. I feel like it just feels like anytime anybody makes like a super dramatic vow / pronouncement, that you immediately just want to go, "Oh no, I think that will probably happen."
It's a good writer's trick as well. Be like, okay, how is she going to show us the opposite of this? So then she, like, Lyman just wants to leave, but she says, no, you have something you want to ask me about bastardry, perhaps. Or bastardy, sorry. What did you, and then it becomes like, someone says about the child and they start talking about the child, but I think that's an interesting line because, oh yeah, Jared asked about the child because she doesn't talk about the child, she talks about bastardy. You were just saying there's a suspicion about Lyman's parentage.
Yeah, which both Lyman and Richard know because they get mad about it. Like we've had more than one instance where they've gotten mad when someone has made some sort of comment about their parentage or Sibylla's faithfulness or whatever. And so, yeah, she's definitely pushing that button. And then Jared just takes it in a different direction. But
Well, and she expects that might be what Lyman asks about, although he would never do that in front of Jared.
No, he's like, I'm waiting to go. Let's go.
Yeah, no way.
So then her first prophecy is that son and father will meet in relation to the baby. Thoughts on that prophecy?
I can see that happening.
I mean, yeah, I think.
I hope it happens.
Like, if not, this book is going to be deeply disappointing. Like, yes, that is the direction that we are headed. So,
Oh, go ahead.
I feel like there needs to be two things in this book for it to be satisfying for me narratively. One, he has to have another confrontation with Gabriel. And two, he and the baby have to meet. I mean, even if they're pulled apart immediately right after they meet, like at some point they have to at least be in the same room. Lyman has to clap eyes on this child. And then I'm sure disaster will then happen and bad thing, whatever. We'll head into book 5. But yeah, those two things have to happen I think, in this story.
Lyman's also super contemptuous about the baby, which I think is him just being defensive and trying to, leave. Our second prophecy is about Una, and it is, you will see her.
Not you will meet. So to me, that says he's either going to see her and not actually get back with her, or that he's going to see her because she's already dead.
Yeah.
It's very clear that in father and son will meet. In this case, it just says you will see her. Oh,
I think you may be right. It would make a lot of sense if Una dies at some point in this book. Like, I know, I don't want her to, but I feel like that would make sense. So, and I don't know, tonally it would, because Lyman was so broken up about her death the first time. And as we know, Dunnett's not afraid to kill off characters we like. So
no, and she's not important to Gabriel's plan that we know of. Whatever Gabriel's plan is with Lyman's son, Una doesn't need to be around for it. She's expendable.
Yeah, and she's in a super vulnerable position where she is now, I'm assuming. So
it's also very telling that Lyman is about to barge out when they're talking about the baby, but when they start talking about Una, he comes back in the room, drops to his knees in front of the dom, and asks her if he's going to meet her again. So he really cares. Her behavior is also really interesting, where she runs her yellowed nail down the line of his cheekbone, and she says, "You were a pretty boy, but ungovernable. You're right not to trust me." And then she gives a third prophecy, which is, you'll see her, but your father's 2 sons will never meet in this life again.
Okay, so for me, this is the first real proof that I have that Lymond and Richard are not full brothers. That they don't.
I don't think they have the same father.
So I cannot see Lymond and Richard not meeting again in these books. So
I agree.
The prophecy is true. Whoever Lymond's brother is with whoever his father was, whether it's Gavin or someone we don't know of yet, that they won't meet again. But it does mean that they have met before, which is interesting.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think that what this prophecy is actually saying is that Lymond has a brother or a half brother, someone that has the same father as him.
Mm-hmm.
And they have met in the past, but they will not meet again. So either this guy's already dead and he'll never meet him again, or he's alive somewhere and is going to die before Lymond meets him. But it's not Richard.
No.
I would stake a somewhat significant amount of money on that fact.
I would, but of course everybody else will think that it's Richard. So
right, Jarrett definitely thinks it's Richard.
Oh,
yeah. So yeah.
And I wonder if Lymond even does. Like, he's not completely sure that he of the parentage yet. So he's been hearing these rumors all of his life. Obviously, the Dame de Tutance thought he was going to ask about bastardy, so it's been on his mind because she reads his mind.
And we don't get a description of Lymond's face after this pronouncement. So
we get Jarrett's reaction.
We get Jarrett's reaction, and he doesn't describe what Lymond looks like.
He describes Lymond's posture stiffen.
Yeah. So I don't know.
And that Lymond holds her gaze. And I love the description right before that of the candle flame in her round predator's eyes. Mm-hmm. So we're reminded that she is not like necessarily a benign presence either.
No. And it's really like, I'm so curious about, we know that she's not a friend of Lymond's, like she's not on his side necessarily, but we also don't get the sense that she's an enemy. Like she seems to be this a character set aside, like she's off to the side, she's predatory, but that doesn't necessarily mean that she's working against Lymond. Like she just seems to be ominous. And so
it's like what she says to Jarrett before, like she's not judging, she's just telling the truth. And so it's like she's like a force of nature in a way, rather than like there's no moral force behind her. She's just a representation of this is what's going to happen.
And if she represents fate, fate doesn't take sides. Fate just is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's how I interpret her, as like a representative of fate.
Mm-hmm.
And then
so do we have, yeah. Well, I was just going to say, do we have, this is obviously not for you, Laura, because you know, but so Philippe, do we have any speculations about this mysterious brother of Lymond's? Like, have we already met him as a character? Like, I do not have good speculation here.
No, I didn't put a lot of thought into it. I mean, it could just be a throwaway thing. It could be somebody we met that's gone. I for a second thought, what if Gabriel and Lymond are brothers? But then Gabriel and Lymond wouldn't meet again, and that's bound to happen. So that's not it. So
I had that thought for a second too. I was like, oh, that would be super dramatically epic. But like the evil twin thing or something. But yeah, I don't think it's Gabriel. And I couldn't think of anyone, like I was trying to sort of go through in my mind men that we've met. Like I don't think it's any of the St. Mary's men. It's not Will Scott, obviously.
It's Dandy Hunter.
It's Dandy Hunter.
Always Dandy Hunter. He's the true villain of these all 6 books.
I don't think it is, but I would love it if it was. Yeah, so I don't have any idea.
Yeah, I mean, there may have been clues, but it's so far out there that I don't think anybody would have been able to really pick up on them yet. So
if there were clues, I missed them completely. So
the last thing she offers is, she says, you don't ask the date of your death, I can tell you. And he just he leaves.
I do love that he says, tell me that Richard will be safe. So like that seems to be an indication that he does think maybe she's talking about Richard. And she glibly repeated his words, Richard will be safe. So that is not an assurance, you know.
Also very notable, so she tells him, you and I will not meet again. You do not know it, but I have loved you.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah.
I mean,
who is she?
Said you were You were a pretty boy, but ungovernable, which means she probably had some experience with him when he was a child. So
Yeah. So like my question isn't so much what's her connection to Lymond as what's her connection to Sibylla. Like, is she somehow connected to Sibylla's family? Is she like a retainer, like a nurse or something? Like, you know, how is she connected to Sibylla? So I don't know.
she could be related in somehow. She could be. There was a throwaway line when we talked about her in Queen's Play, but I was like, watch her end up being secret grandma.
Yeah, right. Or aunt or cousin or yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Or like Sibylla's childhood nurse or who knows.
They have an interesting exchange too, where he tells her, "You have been kind by your lights. For what for what you've done in the past, and for what I think you believe must be done now, I am thankful." And then he starts to ask her about Gabriel, and she says, "Evil matters, so does love, so does pity. My pilgrim, you have still 3 bitter lessons to learn."
Yeah.
That's
I just put question marks off to the side of that.
I'd like to come back to this as we read through this book and try and pinpoint if all 3 happen in this book. There's no guarantee that it's just this book. It might be the rest of the series, but
Right.
I mean, if we're really trusting her prophecies to come true, then
yeah, this feels a little bit like the promise that, or the decision that Lymond made in the last book. Like we were sort of like, what's the decision he made? And we were kind of looking through the book for that decision. I feel like, you know, what are the 3 lessons that he's going to learn? And as we go through the book, like, where are they and all that? I don't know. Yep.
and that's where she reads Jarrett's mind. The exact line. Where does she say it? I tell you this, Mr. Blythe, from my stall in the fair, senile though I appear, just basically exactly what he was thinking about her. So
yeah. Yeah, and that I tell you by this cross and by all you believe that what I foretell will come true. Be my witness. Like, whoa, super dramatic. Which, of course, he loves drama. So, yeah. Also, by the way, down at the bottom of this page, where looming they go out to the street. There, looming miraculously before them was a familiar figure. "Oh, Anaphiron," said Lymond. He says, "Where can we drink in safety?" And Anaphiron, of course, knew. And I wrote below that, I was like, what is up with this guy? That was my comment. So this is where I'm like, what is his deal? I don't know.
Well, he certainly knows the best places to eat and drink.
Yeah.
that's his job.
Is he going to be like, what was his name from book 2, who was the servant that he kept showing up and never did anything, and I was like, he's got to play role, and then nothing happened, and at the end he was like the
Peter Dooley.
Yes, Peter. Is this guy going to be like the Peter Dooley of book 4? So I don't know.
So I think this is a good time to ask this question before we get to Philippa's visit with her. Dee specifically, because Laura, you've read the books and know, how do you feel about this element of sort of prophecy and supernatural coming into the series of books?
I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of ambivalent about it. It's like a flavor.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not, I think as long as, I feel a little bit similar to Laura in that, like, if it was really heavy handed, I don't think I would like it as much. But since Dunnett has a pretty light hand with it in the books, and so, or at least so far, and it's mysterious and intriguing, and we'll see if she's right, kind of stuff. Yeah, I think I'm okay with it.
Okay.
It does have this weird magical element, but
I'm both excited about it because, like I said, I love like trying to track prophecies and seeing what they lead to and pinpointing when exactly they happen. but it just feels weird in this series of books because it's unlike anything we've come across so far. So it may take me some time to get used to it. I still like it. I still like the book, obviously, but it just really kind of took me out because the first time we came across her in Queen's Play, there was a little bit of this, but we were like, oh, maybe it was just a good guess. We don't quite know. But now it really seems clear that she is reading their minds and she has all this information that there's no way that she would have without being able to sort of delve. So,
I mean, maybe, but I wonder if she has connections that we don't know about. Like, if the mind reading stuff seems magic, and the fortune telling stuff seems magic, but the information part may not be. Like, that may just be her having sources and fingers in mini pies and all of that.
Remember how she said in Queen's Play, she said something like, give my regards to Sibylla?
Yeah.
So she knows his family. She's
Right.
definitely got connections. So
Yeah.
so most of this you could say she's not being psychic. She just knows these things because she knows a lot about Lymond specifically. The one thing that is like a question mark to me in that sequence is when she uses like the exact words that Jarrett was thinking. I mean, even that, like a really good sort of fake fortune teller could maybe guess. But it sure seems like a lot of coincidence. And when you combine it with the time in Queen's Play when she guesses what Lymond is thinking, take him 70, it's like,
Yeah. So it seems a little bit magical, which, I mean, I kind of like it. It's fine. I am super suspicious of, I think the beginning of this next section makes her even more suspicious because there's this delay that the, is it Gautier? How do you say his name?
I think Gautier, like that.
Gautier. Basically, it feels like he engineers this delay that first the spin it thing wasn't working, and then the painters got delayed, and then the crate wasn't right, and then but it just all feels like this is an artificial delay on their departure. Which, since they run into pirates later, I just got suspicious about what's happening there. So
I guess the one thing that sort of stood out to me otherwise in that scene is that, and again, this could be information she got from someone else, but she seems to pull the child's name out of Lymond's head because not many people know that the child's been named Caridin. I can't pronounce it, however you pronounce it. That would be probably the hardest bit of information for her to figure out, I think, with pre-knowledge. So, but it's possible that she did. So
did Gabriel say it in the church in Edinburgh? Because if he said it there, a lot of people could have heard it.
that's true. I'd have to go back and see. I'm sure he did, because Lymond knows the child's name at this point, and that's the only place he could have figured it out.
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
Although I think Nicholas de Nicolay knew the child's name as well. That's the first time we ever heard his name, because he was the one that told Sibylla, oh, there's a child named I'm just going to say it's Caridin and just keep saying that. If I mispronounce it, please someone let me know and I'll fix it. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Should we move on? Okay. So they're in Lyon for about 3 weeks because of all the things that Dee just sort of elaborated that happened. Philippa goes to visit the Dame des Dutantes, and I have no idea what I wrote there. Anyway, amongst the things that Philippa learns from the Dame is that Una will have no need of Lymond in Algiers, and that the Dame des Dutantes also says things will be better for everyone if the child is never found, which of course means the child is going to be found and lots of terrible things are going to happen. She also has another woman in the room with her, Kiaya Khatun, I guess.
I think you say it Kiaya Hatun. That's
Okay.
what the audiobook narrator says it.
Yeah.
Kiaya Khatun.
Yeah. Kayak. I said Kaya, but Kaya? Kahatu?
The audiobook narrator, who may or may not be correct, says Kiaya Hatun.
Kiaya Khatun.
Okay.
All right. So the Dame gives Philippa a pretty distinct, very specific task to do. So if she wants to know more about the child, she tells Philippa to go to Algiers first with Lymond, and then afterwards to go to the island of Zakynthos and give this old black ring to, I forget the name of the temple, I didn't write it down.
The House of Palm Tree.
House of Palm Trees, yes. So a very specific task to sort of happen, which of course I'm sure will happen. So, and then also Philippa mustn't tell anybody that she came to visit. So that's that little section.
So my favorite part of this whole sequence is that the Dame de Dutante gives Philippa coffee, and it's prepared like Turkish coffee, and she's never had it before. So it's Turkish coffee has like the grounds in the bottom, and so she drinks the whole thing, including the grounds, and she's like, "This is gross." Yeah. And the Dame's like, "You will dislike it until your taste is formed," which is true of coffee and young people the first time they have it.
Or you never learn to like me, so
missing out.
Nope.
Yeah. I love the bit where she says, do you like this exchange at the bottom of 34? And she says, do you like melodrama? Or the Dame de Dutante says, men, I find it times tiresome. Tell me, do you like melodrama? And Philippe replies, I think there's more than enough in the world without anyone adding to it. And then she's like, what? An unromantic woman at last? You would not have your fortune told even if paid for it? And she said, Philippa replies, Mr. Bly says you can read people's thoughts, so why ask me? And the Dame replies, so that you may ask yourself. What a silly question. Mm-hmm. And I love that because like as a teacher, so often the questions I'm asking my students are actually just because I want them to ask themselves that question, not because I need them to tell me the answer. And that feels like what she's doing a little bit. Like it's such a pedagogical strategy to ask someone a question that you want them to ask.
Well, it's also a lot like something like tarot reading, where even if the reader doesn't really know anything like psychic about the person they're reading for, the experience causes that person to like think about things and ask questions of themselves, right, that then leads to a meaningful experience, even if it's not actually supernatural.
Right. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. I really like the contrast between Philippa's visit and the gentleman's visit earlier in the chapter, how different it is. They visited at night. It was very mysterious with a single candle. They got sort of half-truth answers to their, riddly questions. And here you've got Philippa, who's in the middle of the day drinking coffee with this other woman, and she gets very specific questions.
Yeah.
And what do you think of this mysterious other woman, Kiaya Hatun, who the Dame says is her cousin?
I mean, she also has henna. Like there's also a reference to her skin being orange or her nails being orange at one point, which I thought was interesting and a little bit of a throwback to the nuns, which makes me feel like, I don't know if that detail is thrown in there to like make me feel suspicious about her, or if there is something genuinely suspicious about her. I don't know.
She's interesting also because her clothes are extremely like fancy and rich. Mm-hmm. And she's got turquoise earrings and Baroque pearls and velvet slippers. So it's like very kind of exotic character. And yeah, orange palms and painted her mouth. The orange palms must be henna.
Yeah, so when you put henna on your palms, it turns them orange. Yeah, so it's interesting. And then I think this is the bit about the baby being like not being found. It says the bit about like after the child Caredon is found, Francis has to meet and kill Graham Mallet. And so Philip says, what are you saying is that the child Caredon had be better unfound? Or, and then Philippa just keeps going. She's like, or that you and I and Lymond and Lymond's mother and Lymond's brother and Graham Mallet would be better off if he wasn't discovered. And then she's like, yes, that's what I'm saying. And then Philippa replies, how can I find him? Because she's thinking of the baby. Like all of those people she listed aren't the baby. So like the baby will be better if he's found. So she's like, how do I find him? The adults can deal with themselves. I'm going after the baby, which I love.
Also notable here is that the Dom flat out says there's a trap awaiting Lymond in Algiers, and Lymond knows it very well.
Yeah. Which, yeah, we know.
He's walking into a trap, but he knows it, so he's going to do it.
He's aware that he's walking. He's springing the trap on purpose. So we'll see. Also, interestingly and ominous, where the Dame de Detente says that this whole bit about the ring and the cousin and everything at the House of the Palm Tree, after that will depend on her goodwill, meaning Kiara or Kiaya. And then she says, not on my goodwill, said the musical voice of Kiaya Hatun, on my whim, which, ooh, that's kind of ominous. Like, that's capricious. So,
yeah. So it's kind of awkward coffee, to be honest. These two ladies who don't necessarily like represent a benevolent force.
No. And I love that Philippa leaves this coffee and she's like gritting her teeth as she leaves, and she's like, I do not like melodrama. It's like between her teeth, she's just like, oh.
This is probably the most melodramatic situation that Philippa Somerville has ever found herself in.
All right. She's just like, oh my gosh, I do not like melodrama. I like it.
We love Philippa.
Yeah.
So she's even more determined to get the baby now, especially hearing this news and knowing she has a specific quest. So sort of at the end of this chapter, she argues with Lymond. She's like, Archie's not even here yet, but I really want to come with you. Lymond absolutely says no until we find out that George Gaultier is bringing an assistant with, well, first Lymond says no women allowed. Like, I'm not bringing any women with. But of course, George Gaultier's assistant is a woman named Marta.
I think you say it Marta.
Marta. And of course, he ends up losing the argument. And Philippa's come with anyway. So.
And it's just ridiculous that that's the thing. It's like, there's no women allowed. And Gaultier's like, well, I'm bringing a woman. And then Lymon's like, well, okay, I guess in that case you can go. Like, what?
There's a little bit more about it that we learn next chapter, but this is what we're left with here. So.
It was really funny. I wrote, how is that convincing?
So if Marta was the only woman, then she's at risk. So now there's two of them, so they can like chaperone each other.
Well, three, because Philippa's going to bring Foggy with her. So
yeah.
the oh so formidable maid.
I know, but still.
So
I feel sorry for her. She's getting drug all over Europe and North Africa by this girl.
Oh yeah, she's like in so over her head. So one of the best lines in here is where Lymond says, there are 20,000 men, women, and children in the bagnios of Algiers alone. I am not going to make it 20,001 because your mother didn't allow you to keep rabbits or whatever is at the root of your unshakable fixation. I had weasels instead, said Philippa shortly. Good God, said Lymond, looking at her. That explains a lot. It's just super cute.
It is. I love this banter that they have. Like, it just feels like they're moving more into a place of equals, even though she's still so much younger than him, but it feels like they're moving more towards that. So, and she can kind of hold her own with him verbally.
Yeah, like, she's starting to be able to.
So
meanwhile, Jared,
the train is going down the tracks.
You're on that ship, and
I am on this ship.
A good ship.
So speaking of ships, we end this whole section, this whole chapter, with the description of this hilariously odd crew that are all going to Constantinople together, which is Lymond, Jarrett, Onofre, and Archie's coming along, Gaultier, Marta, and a Spinette.
And a Spinette.
On the Dauphin, or however you say that. Dauphine. The ship.
Dauphine? I don't know.
Doesn't that mean princess? Because the Dauphin is the prince.
Yeah, the French air.
So does it mean princess with the little accent mark? I don't know.
Probably.
I don't know because I don't speak French. If it does, I really like the fact that they're going off to Africa on a ship named Princess.
I think it is. I'm looking at Google Translate.
Yeah.
It says spouse of the Dauphin. So
Yeah. So it's Princess. Yeah.
So Queen Mary, Mary of Scots, basically, who is the Queen of the Dauphin.
Oh, you're right.
Interesting. I mean, it's not named.
That is interesting.
It's a nice sort of connection there.
Yeah.
Take the grain of salt. It was Google Translate, but
No, I think you're right. I think you're right. It's so that would be Mary.
Mhm.
Oh, that's funny.
Did they get married yet? Because
No way.
the past books, there's always been sort of time stamps in the chapters.
I don't think it's been more than like 5 years.
Well, it's been 3 months since Disorderly Nights ended, and Disorderly Nights continued straight on from Queen's Play. So, and Philippa was 10 in Game of Kings, and she's 15 now. So it's only been 5 years since Game of Kings.
Okay.
So
she was like,
so Mary's like under 10 still, right? Or 11?
Yeah, she's like around 10. She must be.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, there's no way.
Not yet.
It's coming.
All right. So chapter 3, Marta. The first chapter sort of says that we find out later that none of this is a coincidence, that everything is happening the way it is, which, is another thing that's like, oh, I want to find out why. So the Spinette is going to travel by water to Marseille with Jarrett, and that means Jarrett is the only one of them to meet Marta to begin with. Philippa has an idea that she thinks Marta is probably Kiaya Khatun. Turns out not to be, though. And they keep calling Marta one of the family. Jarrett, when they do meet up, is initially very sort of weird about introducing Lymond to Marta, and we don't quite know why, but the conjecture is that like she's this beautiful young woman. It's like another person for Lymond to despoil. Although I think it's more the fact that they're basically spitting images of each other. They're very, very similar in voice, composure, and what I found really interesting is that she is described as having a Della Robbia angel face, which is exactly the words that we use to describe Lymond in Game of Kings. Blue eyes, blonde hair.
Yep.
Yeah, you picked up on this too.
Oh, yeah.
Not much to pick up on. It's basically clear.
Oh, yeah. I was like, do we have a sister in addition to a brother?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I mean, maybe cousin, which definitely would put a pin on is the Dame de Tom's like mystery grandmother,
Yeah.
That would maybe.
I mean, it definitely implies some family relationship since Gautier lives with her and Marta is part of Gautier's family or the Dom's family in some way. So there's definitely some genetic connections happening in here.
Yeah. And it feels like the way it's being set up that they're close, like they're siblings or something, like that they're so much alike. But then you hear all the time in literature, like cousins are identical or whatever. So who knows?
It's definitely telling that she looks so very similar. And Lymond is quite upset about it. What do you make of Lymond's reaction?
When he says, I have it marked down, where he's like, damn it, lady, god damn it, or something.
Yeah, he sees Marta and he's like, hell and damnation, and god damn you, lady.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then then his face is wiped clean of all real expression. He moved forward smoothly and sociably to meet, Gautier's assistant. So, I don't know.
What's going on in that head?
I think he sees immediately. It was like, what the hell? It's like, what is this person doing in front of me that looks so incredibly much like me? He already thinks the Dame de Dutance is meddling in his affairs. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah. I sort of wondered a little bit too if the delay, because I really do feel that like Gautier engineered this delay. So was it because they called for Marta to come Like, and she had to get there from somewhere. Is that it? And it didn't have anything to do with pirates attacking them. Like, I don't know. So.
I think also what's really telling is like we know there's always been rumors about Richard and Lymond not being full brothers because they look so different, and we had a reference to it in Game of Kings. We had another one in Disorderly Nights when Evangelista Donati was gossiping about it in Italian. But it's always been just like kind of a rumor that they sort of tried not to think about. And there's that really telling scene with Robin Stewart where he brings it up and Lymond freaks out and punches him out.
Yeah.
So we know that Lymond has like super intense emotions about it. So it sort of explains why he has this intense reaction to Marta. And then he kind of tries to hide what he's thinking, but clearly he's having like an extreme emotional reaction.
Yeah.
If they look so much alike, then Marta also has to look like Eloise. And it's a clear reminder to him about his sister, who he thinks about a lot, but like probably hasn't, seen somebody that looks so close to her in such a long time.
Yeah, that's really true. It's also super interesting to me that they sound the same, because that implies that they were raised similarly, like that they have the same speech patterns, which is weird. So
well, it sort of makes sense because he spent time in France. And so presumably doesn't have much French accent. So when he's speaking French and so and if the tone of their voice is the same, that they would sound the same.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Like, people can't tell my sister and I apart on the phone. Like, if I pick up the phone, people think it's my sister and vice versa. So that's definitely realistic that a sibling would have, like, you wouldn't be able to tell their voice apart. But it's interesting that it would happen if they were raised apart. So
it also is interesting in what it points to in terms of the androgyny of Lymond, because he looks so similar to this beautiful woman. I think also if you're thinking about like what's going on in his head, I think there's only two possibilities here. We know he has a super intense relationship with his mother. So either she's not really his mother, or she cheated on his father. Either way, it's really bad in terms of how he thinks of his mother. So he's probably freaking out about his mom.
I think it's option 2. I think she's definitely his mother. And she had, I don't know if I'm willing to say that she cheated on his father. Like, I wonder if there's some sort of like shenanigans that happened, that, because Sibylla feels to me honorable and pragmatic. Like, but maybe that's because she had some sort of disaster when she was younger, and which led to all this. But I wonder if there's some sort of weird shenanigans that we just cannot guess about, that we don't know about, that led to Richard and Lymond having different fathers. And I think I've said this before. I think it would be more interesting if Lymond is Gavin's, like, Lymond is legitimate and Gavin's son and Richard isn't, but their coloring doesn't match that. So
yeah, I think if anything, it's the other way around. It would be more interesting. I think Gavin is more like Richard in the way that he's been.
I think Richard has to be Gavin's son because their coloring is so much the same.
Because we haven't learned much about this Gavin guy, except that he was horrible to Lymond. That's about all.
Right.
And if
so it seems that
he's
not his son.
And if Gavin knew that Lymond wasn't his son, that may be one of the reasons he was so awful to him.
Yeah.
Oh.
But I just think it would be such an interesting moral problem for Lymond if Richard is not, if he's the heir and Richard isn't, and like he has to decide. Like, I just want to see him struggle with that. I think that would be an interesting thing to struggle with, but I don't think it makes sense in terms of the way they're described. So,
would it be a struggle? What do you think he would do?
I mean, maybe not. Like, I think maybe it might be the kind of thing where he would find out like that piece of information and would just be like, oh, no, like, it's Richard's. And not even, like, I think he's very self-sacrificial when it comes to his brother. Obviously, we've seen that. So it could just be just let it go kind of thing. But I don't think Richard would. I think if Richard knew, now I'm going off in this incredibly speculative thing, but because I don't think it's true, because Richard is Gavin's son. Like, I think that's evident. That's not a mystery at all. So I don't even think it's a real thing. So never mind.
So if we are assuming that Marta is related to Lymond, a sister, a half sister, a full sister, whatever,
Right?
is she Sibylla's daughter? Or is she whoever Lymond's father is child with some other woman?
Maybe, like,
Because that's an awful thing to keep secret for so long, that Sibylla would keep secret that she had a fourth child.
I think because, okay, if we're going with Lymond and Eloise are not Gavin's children, but Sibylla raised them as Gavin's children, and clearly Gavin did too. Like, he did not, this was not information that he spread out. Like, he didn't, put Sibylla away or reject her or whatever because of this, although probably emotionally he did. But so then why would there be a mysterious fourth sibling that just didn't get into this group? So I think that's an argument for her being the daughter of the mysterious father that we don't know, rather than Sibylla, if that makes sense.
He also had a son that Lymond will never meet again.
Right, and there's also a son out there. So are we saying that that Sibylla had 5 kids that we had, like 2 of them we don't know? I think that's a little, I don't think that makes sense.
We'll find out eventually.
Yeah, I think there's kids by a dad floating around, maybe.
Yeah, I think Sibylla probably only had the 3 of them. That's what I'm assuming. Although, Richard and Lymond look so incredibly different, and here you've got Lymond and Marta looking so incredibly similar.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it all could be just genetics, but
I mean, maybe they're twins and she was spirited away and Sibylla didn't know or something. Like,
well, no, because Marta's only 18, and I don't think.
Oh, right. And and
got to at least be in his mid-20s at this point.
Wait,
Right.
where does it say she was 18?
It says it in this chapter. Unless she's lying about her age. She says that she's 18 years old.
Oh, Marta does.
Oh, does
She's
she?
an 18-year-old blonde of doubtful virginity. Oh, wait.
No, that's speculation. That's
right,
not
that's
about
the
her.
speculation. All right,
No,
sorry.
we don't know her age.
So we don't know if she's 18 or
It
not.
could be like a twin spirited away in the night or something.
All right, I was assuming she was 18 because of that. I didn't realize that was just speculation. So
So who knows?
Which means that she could be a twin spirit away.
you're right.
Yeah.
Um,
Was Sibylla told that only 1 child was born, but actually 2 were or something, Who knows? I put nothing by these books. Like, there is no over the top dramatic element that I will not believe couldn't happen. Like, does that make sense? I would believe any over the top narrative choice. So secret twin, evil twin, I'll believe it all.
triplets.
Triplets.
I mean, we've already had incest, so.
That's true.
I mean, at least if Lymond is immediately suspicious that he could be related to her, that we don't have to worry about him trying to bait her.
Very good point. Yeah, I don't think there's any danger there.
No. So yeah, basically that's it for this little bit of the chapter. And at the end of it, Gautier convinces Lymond to let Marta come with them, and that means Philippa can join as well. So the women will be traveling aboard the Dauphiné with them.
The dolphin. Yeah.
Dauphiné.
I love this little moment where they're talking about Marta, and they're sort of interrogating Jarrett, like, what's she like? And so he's Jarrett flushed, and then Lymond's laughing where he says this thing about she's an 18-year-old blonde of doubtful virginity, like clearly making a comment on Jolita and all of that, like, oh, we got another Jolita kind of thing. And then so then Philippa says to her neighbor, so she's talking to some man, I don't think we know who it is, and says,
probably.
huh?
Just one of the servants, I
Yeah,
think.
she says, like, so is she pretty? She's pretty, said the man. Philippa studied the taciturn face. Oh, I see, she said. Mr. Blythe wants her all to himself. For a moment, she thought it hadn't worked. Then the man gave a snort. I love that little insight into the fact that she's totally manipulating this guy. And like, she just says that just to try and get him to say stuff. And she's like, oh, well, that didn't work, but then it does work. And you just get an insight into her, like, trying to manipulate people verbally, which feels like she's like mini Lymond. Like she's trying to.
And why is Jarrett wanting to keep Marta away from Lymond?
Well, it could be because of Lymond's his reputation and sort of, the whole affair with Jolita and stuff. I also had a thought that Jarrett might be a little bit smitten with Marta. So, because he seems very flushed.
Especially if we do this, okay, so now I'm gonna go down a little road. So if Jarrett is like semi in love with Lymond, and this girl, which is, sort of violates his cultural norms, and he wouldn't want to happen. So if this girl, it like looks like Lymond, sounds like Lymond, kind of like Lymond, well, then he could be in love with this girl and it would be socially appropriate, and he kind of gets to have his cake and eat it too, sort of. So
yeah, I think it's all that, and also he notices that she looks just like Lymond, and he probably figures that Lymond is going to freak out about it.
Which he does.
Which, yeah.
Doesn't show it, but he does.
There's also a great description of her that Gautier has about how, she's been to Anatolia with me. She goes to Venice on her own to buy and sell. So she gets to, like, for a woman in this time period, she travels independently. She goes to all these places. Like, she's working, fixing clocks, jewels and stuff, and buying things. But, like, it's a pretty cool life.
She's super competent. I mean, there's the picture we get of her throughout the pirate battle is just incredibly knowledgeable about things that would seem to be not in a woman's sphere, like battle tactics and stuff like that. And so I'm so fascinated by her. Like she seems very competent, very knowledgeable, very like cool under pressure. And she's also willing to like share knowledge with Philippa, and she's like, hey, we're supposed to stay down here, but like, hey, if you lift this up, I'll tell you what's going on, and all that. And I like her.
She also has a really in-depth knowledge pool about just the formation of the boats, and like how the oarsmen work and like their different positions, and like she's obviously done a lot of boat travel. So
yeah. And she knows about Lymond's history because she's the one who spills it to Philippa about him being a slave.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yes. So makes me wonder if she knows that there's a connection there, or if she's in on it, or she's oblivious as well.
Yeah.
It is interesting that they don't talk about the fact that she looks like him. Like it's so obvious, everyone sees it, and like, let's just pretend that we don't.
Let's not talk about it. Yeah. Yeah. It's weird. And I feel like there's this willful like reluctance to talk about things like this, like unless you want to make Lymond mad, like you don't bring it up, so nobody brings it up.
Which, to be fair, I wouldn't bring it up to him either. I don't want my head bitten off.
Nope. I don't want to make him mad. Also, I love Philippa's perfectly prepared to be an eavesdropper, but unwilling to look like one. That was so good. It's like she's totally willing to break the rules. She just doesn't want to get caught. And then she gets caught.
She's the best.
By the person she thought she was eavesdropping on.
Yeah. Yeah.
We get 2 letters that have been written to Kate, one from Lymond and one from Philippa, just sort of updating her on what's happening. So Philippa indeed is now coming along for the journey to Algiers and environs further.
Yeah, I was a little, I felt like this comment, the Lymond's letter to Kate felt a little sad to me. just the end of it where he says, be kind to her when she comes back. Her love is not only for children, but for humanity. And I love that he sees that about her. She will be a good-hearted and magnificent zealot one day, as her mother is now. Goodbye, Kate. And that just felt really final, sort of, in a weird way. And so I don't know why, but it felt melancholy.
I can see that.
Well,
Yeah.
he got that prophecy about never meeting his father's other son again, so he could be thinking, well, I must not be going back to Scotland again.
Right. Yeah. And then Philippa references blackberry pie again in this letter, which I loved.
I love that, and then also Kate reading this and wiping away her tears and thinking about Philippa's shaky understanding of the diet of 1-year-old babies.
Yeah.
Just lots of blackberry pie and milk.
Yeah. But I do love that Philippa's like, I'm gonna bring him home and you can teach him songs and we can, like, she just wants to adopt this baby and like bring him back to Flaws Valley, and which is interesting to me that she thinks the baby's coming back to Flaws Valley.
Well, because she thinks Lymond doesn't want him.
Yeah. But it's still interesting that she's not thinking about like dropping him off at mid culture.
Well, I think she mentioned that to the Dom, and the Dom was like, Sibylla won't live forever, and Richard already has a son. Like, that's no place for Lymond's child.
Yeah.
So.
Like, I'll just take him home with me. So.
And how is Philippa going to get married when she's raising Lymond's child?
I do not think she's thinking about that. Kate might be thinking about that, but yeah. So, yeah.
So the Dauphine sets sail to Algiers. Lymond shows Philippa around the ship. He gives her sort of a tour of everything. And then when Philippa talks to Marta about it later, she did not realize that Lymond used to be a slave. This is when she first finds out. During the trip, Lymond asks all three women to go to the captain's cabin because it looks like they are about to be attacked. So while they are in the captain's cabin, this is when sort of Marta lets her peek up in the hatch and she discovers all these things. There's 2 ships attacking them. They are pirates. I love it. It's both touching and kind of frightening when Philippa asks, what language are they speaking? Because I want to know how to tell them no.
Yeah.
So Lymond's sort of battle tactics win over. He ends up using that sort of cannonball, 2 cannonballs with a chain beneath it. I think it's a mast breaker. I don't know if that's the exact term, but he breaks the mast of the smaller ship and then maneuvers the oarsmen to row backwards so that when both ships are trying to ram at him, they ram into each other and they make their escape into the sandstorm that is coming off of the coast of Africa, that is like sort of depositing mud and detritus all over the ship.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we end this portion of the book.
Yeah. The battle was really fun to read, I thought. Like, normally I don't get caught up in battle tactics when I'm reading, like when I'm reading hard sci-fi and stuff, I tend to just skip over the battle tactics and all that. But I had, this was super interesting. It was it was very cinematic, like visually you could really see what was happening, and I liked it.
You said the same thing about the sword fight in Game of Kings, and I agree. Dunnett is such a cinematic writer that her action scenes are just so fun to read.
Yeah, they're so visual. Like her descriptions are so, you're just in the moment in ways that I think often battle scenes and fight scenes get described in a very tactical way, but not a visceral way. And this felt very like in the moment, so it was more fun to read.
Agreed.
Yeah, I didn't quite know how they'd get out of it because they're clearly overwhelmed in this. And I was like, maybe.
I totally thought they were getting captured.
Yeah, it's like maybe they're not really after them. Maybe they'll just be like, take some of the cargo. But no, they wanted everything. So.
Oh, I thought they were going to get hauled off in chains to Algiers. Like, I totally thought they were getting captured.
This could be the trap that was waiting for them. I mean, again, this could just be pirates or this could be Gabriel.
Yeah. I don't think this is the trap. I think there's something bad is waiting for them.
I don't think so either, but it could have been,
Yeah.
What do you think is waiting for them?
something bad. I don't know.
Well, Una, apparently, because he will see her.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, maybe it'll be a thing where like they get to Algiers and there's a trap and they spring the trap and get out of it, but Una and the baby aren't there. So then they go to another city and then they're not there. And then they go to another city and then they're not there. Like maybe this will just be like they're traipsing across the Mediterranean and, you know, chasing down. I feel like it might be an interesting like road trip book where we're just like going from place to place and it's Jarrett and Philippa and Lymond and Marta just zipping along with the spinet. You know? Who knows?
Yeah.
And Onofrian giving them very luxurious food.
Right.
And Foggy cowering in a corner somewhere.
Cherry sauce on everything.
That actually sounds really good.
It does sound really good. Some of that food description, I was like, oh, I'm hungry.
Oh.
So what did you end up kind of concluding about where is like Marta and Philippa going as characters and what is their relationship going to be?
I would be all for sort of a lot of this book being in their perspective, like Philippa and Marta going off on adventures while Lymond and Jarrett do their own thing.
Yeah. I feel like Marta is like, she's certainly more knowledgeable about the world than Philippa. She's older than Philippa. We don't know how much, but she's been around. I mean, she's traveled, she's independent, she's competent. Like I as long as she doesn't end up to be a bad guy, like I like her and Philippa together just because I think she's also willing to share. Like she's not, at least in this fight scene, she seemed very willing to be like, hey, let me tell you what I know. And then, but she was also wise about, okay, now we have to go down. Like she's willing to teach. She's willing to include Philippa in what she's doing, but she also seems to have some wisdom about not pushing boundaries into danger. So I like this about her.
Mm.
There's an interesting line she has on page 54. She says, I never expect anything. It provides a level, low-pitched existence with no disappointments.
Mm-hmm.
What did you make of that?
It feels like someone who's been disappointed, you know?
Yeah.
Like that's something you learn.
And it's a little cynical. It's something that happens as a result of, you know, bad things happening to you, but it's definitely cynical.
Sounds like something Lymond would say.
Oh, yeah.
So if good things happen, you're pleasantly surprised. I love Philippa's reply to that too, where she says, I'm all for a level, low-pitched existence, said Philippa. And when you see your way back to one, for heaven's sakes, don't forget to tell me. At which Martha laughed out loud. So I like that a lot.
Her laughter also is very Lymond saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Both laugh.
Yeah. So, and then like Philippa again, she says during this battle, she says, it seemed to Philippa that one might as well die naive as die ignorant. So she kept on inquiring, like, why do we do this? Why do we do that? And so she's kind of like, well, if we're going to die, I can die with more knowledge than I have now or not. So I might as well, ask questions. I'm like, oh.
So I think also telling is Philippa sees how Marta talks about Lymond and she observes, you don't like him. And Marta agrees, no, I have no great love for him. What do you think's going on there?
It speaks again to possibly them being related. Like if for some reason Lymond's exist, because it doesn't feel like they know each other or have met before. But if she knows about him, if perhaps for some reason his existence has meant something negative in her life and she's somehow like she resents him for something, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
What is it gonna do? I mean, I just feel it sets up some potential for conflict as well. They're on this road trip together and she doesn't like him.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be the first time Lymond is traveling with people that don't like him. Probably won't be the last time.
Yeah. But I mean, there's definitely mystery here. Like, why doesn't she like him? Because I feel like they haven't met. So, like, for someone not to like Lymond, having met Lymond makes sense. Like, lots of people don't like him because he's kind of a dick. But for her to not like him sight unseen feels like there's a mystery there. Like, there's something to discover. So,
I mean, also his reputation precedes him, so people know about Lymond in this time frame. So, I mean, she could have just heard all of the things about him, especially since
she seems kind of more practical than that. I don't know.
I mean, if she was living in France, she could have heard all about his sort of Tatty Boy Bala. He's like, ugh, that man is repugnant.
That's true. That is very true. His reputation could have preceded him and all of that. I also love the end where Philippa says that she and Marta were we were laying wagers over whether we'd rather be raped or resigned to a smug little victory. And obviously she's being sarcastic, but she's like teasing Lymond about the fact that like if he wins, they're gonna have to like deal with the smugness of the victory. And they're like, is it better to, and then he replies with, why not have both? We can arrange it, which again goes back to that he has joked about raping people before. And so like that is a joke that has happened. So it's like dark, like super dark. So we're gonna have this dark humor, but yet still banter that like they're clearly teasing each other and being sarcastic.
Yeah, I think, well, as we all know, the words that come out of Lymond's mouth can be horrifying, but it's all about, same thing with Gabriel, watch what he does, not what he says.
Yep. So, and I think this is just a sign that I think Philippa knows that, like, or at least she's joining in this banter, like, eagerly. So.
Well, and I like that she, she's not going to let his ego grow out of hand. She's always going to like counter him and call him out.
Yeah.
So with this setup, do you guys have any other things like predictions or things you hope from this motley crew on their road trip?
I really want Philippa to find the baby. Like, I would really, really, really like for this book to conclude in some way with Philippa having succeeded in this mission. Like that she's so determined and her heart is, well, it's an impractical desire. Like it seems a little crazy, but I really want her, this mission she's gone on to save this baby. Like I really want her to save the baby. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think I said a lot of what I think may happen as we went over these chapters, but I'm looking forward to the confrontation with Gabriel, but I don't think it's going to come anytime soon. I think that'll definitely be in the last half of the book. I wonder if they'll make a stop in Malta to sort of try and debunk him, although they already sort of...
I think they're headed to Algiers.
If they showed up in Malta, Diomedes would probably throw right in jail and just disbelieve anything he'd say anyway. So
yeah. I would also really like to see a more exploration of Lymond's history with Durgut and like what happened to Lymond in that part of his life, which we just don't know anything about other than it happened. But I hope that maybe we get into like, who does he know and what kind of relationships does he have and how did he get those relationships and what does that mean and like what resources does he have in the Mediterranean and Constantinople and North Africa and all of that.
Yeah. It's just a lot that could happen, so it's kind of hard to make any sort of solid concrete predictions.
Yeah. They're going to go some places and do some stuff.
I know for sure Algiers is coming up because that's where they are now. So
yeah, we're going to Algiers.
Yeah. I'm hoping things are okay with Una. I don't think they are, but like I really kind of want to see how Una and Philippa would interact with each other. I would really like to get that. I don't know if it's going to happen, but
I'd also like to see more of Dragout's head concubine. I forget her name, but she seemed super cool. Like the very little bit that we saw of her in the last book, she seemed awesome.
Guzelle.
Yeah, Guzelle.
Yeah. So I really liked her. And then there was somebody who like betrayed the woman who had Carradine branded. Like she seemed awful. So
Looks like the third wife of Dragout, and then she
yeah,
got
the
turned off.
third wife or something.
Which I think tells you that Dragout wasn't planning for that to happen.
Right.
It was not part of anybody's plan, or
Right.
maybe it was somehow like Gabriel's plan that he got the third wife to do it or something.
Right, but it wasn't the head wife or Dragout's plan. Yeah. So I hope we see more of. Was she his wife? Was she wife number one? The lady who was so cool.
Oh, I think she's like his chief concubine or something.
Chief concubine, which is a position of a lot of power. So,
oh yeah.
So yeah, I'd like to see more of her. I think that's
Philippe, you want to see how how Una and Philippa would interact with each other. How do you think they would interact with each other?
Yeah, I don't know. I think Una or Philippa would be very sort of. I don't think she would like Una to begin with. I think there's a jealousy that would be involved because of her past relationship with Lymond. But also because she cares so deeply about this child she's never met. There's also that. Maybe there's a respect involved because she's the mother of this child that she's been searching for. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I feel like they're both very practical women who are like have the goal of like they put other people's needs before their own in a lot of ways. I think Una does it in a very self-destructive way, but they might find some common ground. Like, who knows?
Yeah, I think there'd be especially interesting if they do rescue Una to have like Una, Philippa, and Marta, like three distinctly different women all sort of working together for the rest of this book. That would be neat.
Can I just say I really like the women. Like we get more women in this book. Like this is nice. I feel like I was like, is this the book of the women? Like, yay. So
yeah, we had quite a few before, but I do think there's probably more, and there's lots of it passing the Bechdel test.
Yeah. And I just feel like in previous books, the women have been kind of like side characters, you know, like Lymond has encountered women and they've done things, but this feels like, at least for Philippa, like she's a point of view character and has been a point of view character for a lot of these beginning chapters.
Well, Christian was a point of view character, but she kind of
disappeared.
Well, and we almost never had her interact with anyone but Lymond.
Yeah, and she kind of disappeared pretty quickly, like in terms of being in her perspective. So I kind of am hoping we get this, like this continues throughout the whole book and we get Marta's perspective and Philippa's perspective, Una's perspective, and who knows.
Awesome. All right. Any final comments on these chapters?
I don't think so.
Good
but
start.
I'm liking how it started so far.
Yeah. Nice opening.
Thank you everyone for watching.